Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of history's absolute most terrifying, yet completely inspiring survival stories. We're relying entirely on the original mission accounts to reconstruct a flight that literally had the whole world holding its breath. This isn't just a story about space exploration, folks. It's an absolute masterclass in crisis management and human ingenuity under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
I want you to picture this. You're trapped in the freezing, pitch-black void of space, hundreds of thousands of miles away from home. And suddenly, boom! A violent explosion shatters the silence. Your oxygen is rapidly bleeding out into the vacuum. What do you do? I mean, how do you even survive that?
Section 1. Historic Flight. Journey to the Moon.
So to really understand this, we gotta remember the sheer optimism back in April 1970. The mission started off totally flawlessly. The astronauts were just full of this genuine, relaxed enthusiasm as their ship launched and sped toward the moon. Down at Mission Control, everyone was feeling incredibly confident. You had millions of people all over the globe glued to their TVs, watching what was supposed to be this triumphant, almost routine trip. Everything was operating exactly by the book. But then, right in the middle of all that excitement, just days into the flight, everything changed in a heartbeat. A devastatingly loud explosion rocked the entire spacecraft. Section 2. Terrifying explosion in space. The immediate aftermath was, well, utter chaos. Imagine the insane sensory overload inside that tiny capsule. The crew felt these intense, violent vibrations shuddering through the whole ship. Deafening warning alarms instantly started blaring in the sudden darkness. With adrenaline absolutely spiking, the crew frantically ran through panicked system checks, just desperately trying to figure out what was breaking down around them.
And what they found was quite literally a worst-case scenario. A crucial oxygen tank had exploded. But this wasn't just a simple mechanical hiccup, It triggered this terrifying domino effect. Breathable air was vanishing in a matter of minutes. And worse, this massive failure instantly crippled the ship's vital power and water supplies. The horrifying realization that they might actually not make it back to Earth, that became very, very real.
Section 3. Struggle to return alive.
In a split second, the whole point of the mission had to pivot. That monumental dream of walking on the moon, completely abandoned. There was only one goal left now, and it was desperate. Get back to Earth alive. To even have a shot at surviving, they were staring down a nightmare of cascading threats. With oxygen dropping and power critically low, they actually had to shut down almost every vital system just to save whatever juice they had left. But here's the catch. Sacrificing power meant sacrificing heat, so the tiny cabin was plunged into extreme freezing temperatures. It became this brutal physical endurance test. They were shivering through sleepless nights, severely rationing water, and all while forcing their exhausted, freezing brains to do hyper-complex orbital math. Because one tiny calculation error, that meant certain death.
Section 4. Poisonous gas and unique solution.
As if freezing in the dark wasn't bad enough, a new, totally invisible threat started creeping up on them. Carbon dioxide levels in the cabin were rising dangerously high. Literally, every breath they exhaled was a poison that would slowly suffocate them if it wasn't scrubbed from the air. And this led to one of the most incredible moments in the entire Apollo program. The engineers back on Earth had to urgently invent a makeshift filter. But they couldn't just build whatever they wanted. They had to design a literal lifesaver using only the exact random scraps the astronauts had up in space. Guided entirely by radio, the crew rigged up this crazy contraption out of plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape. It was an absolute triumph of on-the-fly engineering, and it successfully got the toxic gas under control.
Section 5. Danger of returning to Earth. So the spacecraft is finally limping back toward Earth, right? But now they face their most terrifying hurdle yet. Re-entering our atmosphere is incredibly violent. The capsule slams into the atmosphere and essentially becomes a fireball. Imagine taking this freezing, heavily damaged ship and suddenly blasting it with thousands of degrees of searing heat. The friction is just unimaginable. And the margin for error was completely razor-thin. Even the absolute slightest miscalculation in their angle, and they'd either skip off the atmosphere into deep space forever or burn to ashes instantly. And then came the blackout. As that blazing descent started, a massive wall of ionized plasma built up around the capsule, totally cutting off communications. For a few agonizingly long minutes, radio contact completely dropped. The whole world was waiting in absolute terrifying silence. Nobody, not the brilliant engineers at Mission Control, not their terrified families, nobody knew what was going on. Did the compromised heat shield hold together? Or had the crew been completely incinerated? I mean, every single second felt like an eternity.
Section 6.
story of courage and victory.
Then suddenly breaking that unbelievably heavy silence, the radio crackled back to life. Contact was restored. Through the static, the astronauts confirmed they were alive. They managed a safe splashdown in the ocean. When that charred capsule finally hit the water, the emotional release was just indescribable. Mission Control absolutely erupted in cheers. People were wiping away tears, and this overwhelming wave of collective joy swept across the entire globe. Millions of people who had been holding their breath for days could finally deeply exhale.
Apollo 13 became so much more than just a space mission. It stands today as a permanent testament to human courage, raw intelligence, and just an absolute refusal to give up. Sure, it wasn't a successful moon landing, but honestly, it was probably NASA's most brilliant display of sheer grit. It transformed from a near tragedy into one of the most inspiring survival stories in human history.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. When faced with almost certain failure, what can human ingenuity not conquer? When human beings are pushed to the absolute edge of survival, working together across hundreds of thousands of miles, is there any problem our collective minds cannot solve? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today.